Bacon and bananas.
Bacon wrapped bananas wrapped in bacon.
I've also had a bacon peanut butter sandwich lately, and that was amazing.
They had a bacon peanut butter milkshake in Asheville last time I was down there. That looked pretty good. Bacon and peanut butter, and like so they mix it all in there, and then they stick a piece of bacon into the milkshake, like so you can like dip it, and eat the bacon and banana milkshake. Looked amazing. So we just got back from the top of a mountain, breaking a world record for the highest altitude terrestrial LAN party using ASUS laptops, Corsair keyboards, and an ASUS router, thanks to Intel, Corsair, and ASUS. Yes, we did it. We freaking did it. We went up there, froze on the top of the mountain in a blizzard, and we played games with 10 of us.
This is the most amazing view I've ever seen in my life.
It was awesome, Wendell. It was freaking awesome. Here's the gang that was there. You guys can see most of them. There were actually more people than that, but I'm showing them the Reservoir Dogs picture right now on the screen. it's ridiculous. Thanks to the guys in PC Master Race that put this together. This photo was taken by Jimmy, and you guys got your hands on it. One of you beautiful people out there in internet world land, and just did this atrocity. It's awesome. Anyway, so I'm assuming I missed a few things, and all these videos are going to be coming in about a week. Everyone's taking a week to put them together properly to make sure that they're all nice and fancy and everything. So the video is going to be coming in about a week. We kicked ass, and it worked. And thanks to you, Wendell, you put together a mod that Kane used on the summit to make the router work. You want to tell everybody what you did just a little bit, and then we'll we don't want to spoil the video, but
But it turns out that they need a lot of power, and 12 volts is not enough. So we needed something that would last for hours and hours and was more than 12 volts. And so I had some crap laying around, and we didn't have any time, and it was magical.
Yeah, we just basically bought a UPS and ripped it apart, and then used your contraption. But you guys will see it in the video. Anyway, let's talk about China, shall we? You feel like talking about China? We always talk about the USA because we're so damn important. USA, USA, USA. That's just like someone from the USA, isn't it, to talk about the USA nonstop? I'm very sorry. Let's talk about China and how they affect the USA. Where the hell's my mouse? So the USA is going to be releasing control of ICANN, and ICANN is the service that basically controls all the domains and everything on the internet, assigns them all to different people. Does a lot more than that, but it's right now. I thought that the U.S. relinquishing control over this was going to be a pretty good thing, but now I'm a little bit worried because countries like China are trying to take control of the internet, and that would be probably not in the best interest of the world. And let's go ahead and talk about the article here on the screen. This is a brand new, here's the original article, but God, it's annoying. So I guess that what they're doing is they're trying to instill some guiding principles based upon their own current guiding principles using their, what's the 7-step thing? Let me close it before it starts making noise. Yeah, it's the double 7 strategy. Now they have like all these different areas here. So, I mean, like the 7 basic things that they're really trying to regulate are the social system, natural interests, legitimate interest of citizens, social order, and morality and information authenticity. So let me just break that down and tell you exactly what that means. So, of course, they want to make sure that the internet is going to be good for their citizenry. They want to make sure it's going to be good for the citizens of the world. They want to have more of a curated experience. They want to make sure that there's nothing on there that's damaging to minors. They also want to make sure that there's no misinformation on there. And misinformation to China means anything that is not the Chinese way of seeing the world, like so, or I guess things that they don't want you to know. They want to be able to control all that. All right, so really, this is just Xi Jinping's idea, and he just basically wants the rest of the world to be like China. And if they can control that, if they can control the internet, it will make them way more powerful. And he's really, trying to. I guess he's trying to phrase this in a way that it's going to be best for the emerging economies in the world, and China is probably one of the biggest emerging economies. In fact, they're probably now going to be the world's biggest superpower, but they're still emerging because they're getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So he wants to do what benefits those countries the most, and I'll let you go ahead and take it from here, Wendell.
Well, they know that they're not going to be able to take over the internet. And that's not what it's really about. I mean, short term, they're like, yeah, we want to be able to do this, that, and the other. But it really is about control of the internet in their area, in their part of the world. And the term for this that you hear thrown around, it's been a long time, since it was really in the news, but this is really a thing in the 90s and 2000s, but it's the balkanization of the internet. And that's where the geopolitical boundaries all of a sudden apply on the internet. And so with China, it is like 1984 doublespeak, where you are in a situation and it's like they don't want you to know certain information, or they want to present the most spun possible way of presenting it. And if they don't control that, if they don't directly control that, then that makes them uncomfortable and nervous. And so that's why a lot of, stateside services like Google and things like that inside China, with services that Chinese citizens use, very often those services are degraded and things like that, because they're already exerting control and finding ways to control the internet from within their organization. And they're also looking at things like, we're going to talk about the Google EU ruling and how, the EU privacy things. And there are these global geopolitical rulings, and China's looking at that and saying, well, if these companies have to behave this way in the EU and it's not global, and all of a sudden we have a say-so in what's on the internet that's not in China, then they want to control it. So it's not really like control, we're going to take over your equipment. It's control in the sense that this isn't cool in China, therefore you must adapt. Just like with Google and the whole privacy thing in Europe, it's like that's not cool in Europe, and so Google start pulling European search results. And so now in China wants to say these are not cool things for China. We want to cater and control the experience that people inside of China have on the internet, and that is one way that the internet ends up being balkanized.
Having just come from China, I do want to say that would be probably the worst thing possible for the internet. The internet was almost unusable in China while I was there. And I kept thinking, there's a lot of really interesting businesses here. There's a lot of really tech-savvy people. And what would it do to this country and to like the smaller economy, the small businesses and that sort of thing in China? What would it do if the Chinese government relaxed just a little bit and, gave them some room to use the internet without censorship? I think that their economy and their small business economy would absolutely explode, and it would be scary. I mean, their IQ is like on average 4 or 5 points higher compared to like the USA, and I think a million points higher compared to like Australia and that sort of thing. But we get so much hate mail for that. But really, if you could imagine what they could do, just the innovation that could happen, it would be on another level.
It's slightly weird because it's almost like China is saying, hey, we want you to participate in, I don't know if you could call it cultural, and I'm going to use the Tiananmen Square example. And so it's like, hey, rest of the world, this is what we want our citizens to know about Tiananmen Square. So help us out. And it's like, Facebook and Google and everybody's like, all right, that sounds great. We'll make sure that Chinese citizens using our service experience exactly what you have in mind, and that'll be totally fine. And it's like, business actually could go there, because if these markets are open, if you say to Google or Facebook, hey, we'll open up this market for you, but you have to follow our rules, yeah, they're going to do it.
Yep. All right, well, speaking of following the rules, Google has started to take down search results in Europe thanks to the EU's ruling for the right to be forgotten. So what the right to be forgotten is they decided that people who have stuff on the internet that they do not want to have on the internet, they do have a right to be forgotten. And they've allowed these people to go and, I guess, petition Google to remove search results. I guess it's not even really a petition. It's just they go online and say, hey, we don't like this picture of me when I was 17 upside down with a beer bong and a hooker. And Google's like, all right, well, I guess we have to take it down because you have a right to be forgotten now that you're running for office or whatever, So they've actually started to remove stuff. It's kind of strange to me. But yeah, that's happening.
I don't see a problem with the right to be forgotten, but it seems like you should get it off the internet and not get it off Google, because Google's not the internet. Google makes it easy to find stuff on the internet, but I mean, there are other search engines. There will be other ways to find the information unless it's removed, and then Google should remove it. I guess Google has other services that are not search engine services that maybe this really applies to, but I see it mostly happening to search engines first. And there are merits to the argument to the right to be forgotten, but the implementation you'd have to be really careful about it to not make it overly onerous to deal with.
Well, you've also got to watch out for corporations who, let's say, they go into a third world country and just melt 1,000 people because they're trying to like harvest some thing or some chemical or trying to make something happen. So they just accidentally melted a village, all the people in it, and then they petition Google for the right to be forgotten because, you know, they have that right now. So you got to watch for that kind of thing as well. I mean, there has to be some lines as far as what you can and cannot, you know, remove from the internet.
The law does have exceptions for things that are of interest to citizenry.
Yeah.
But I don't know enough about it to know if those are really effective. Some of the folks that wrote in last time we talked about it said that they're actually very effective in terms of like political candidates that have done stuff in public office can't request records of stuff they've done in public office be taken down. But it could also be the thin end of a wedge, so you're really going to have to be careful. And it always makes me nervous when there's global control of information, because then it turns into a 1984 type thing where you can just erase something from history, and then it's like, whoa, that's kind of weird. And so I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how this develops. So we got to keep a sharp eye on it, because the apparatus for doing this can be abused, but it's probably less bad than the abuses that have already taken place. So let's see how it goes.
All right, we've got a lot of Google stuff to talk about. Most of it is about Android. There's a new Android operating system coming out. A new version of Android coming out, Android L. Kind of a strange name. It's no longer named after candy. What is L some kind of candy I haven't had yet? I don't even know. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about their new API. We're going to talk about their new compiler, I guess. And let's just get started right now. Talking about the style first. Here's sort of what it's going to look like. The style, really, to me, seems to have some of the lines and some of the, I guess, just plain minimal styling of Windows, of the new versions of Windows. Like Windows 8. Go ahead.
I went in a different direction. It is flat, but they're adding dimensional elements too, which is against the flat design. So they're adding drop shadows and shading and things like that. And so it is sort of this Windows 8 flatness, which I think it's interesting that Microsoft did that first, and then Apple was like, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's do that with iOS 8.
Yeah.
But now it's happening on Android, but they've sort of taken it a step farther, and so they're adding this dimensional component back to it. But that's not the most interesting thing. The most interesting thing is that Google historically has never cared that much about design. And the vibe from this year's I/O 2014 was design is king. We need to have all of our ducks in a row and everybody marching to the same beat in terms of user interface design and user experience. And that's not something that Google has ever cared that much about before. I mean, they've cared a little bit, and they've designed some stuff for Google Now, and they've been figuring it out. And that goes back to a mantra that I've had for years, which is Google is getting better at being Apple than Apple is getting better at being Google. And so I think that if that continues down the road, Google is just going to increase momentum and deploy all this really kick-ass technology with a good design, whereas Apple has always had a pretty good design, but the technology underneath has been a little bit ugly.
So one of the other things that's interesting about this whole Apple versus Google thing is a lot of the iOS devices are extremely responsive. So what they've done now is they've gone back and they've looked at their compiler, and they're completely changing everything. So they're moving to something called ART, and that's the Android Runtime. And what this is doing differently is it's pre-compiling everything and then storing it in cache, so things are going to be much snappier instead of doing all the compiling in real time. I'll let you go ahead and possibly get a little bit nerdier with that.
Okay, so the state of the once upon a time there was Java, and Java was amazing because it was write once, run anywhere, and you would compile your code to Java bytecode, and then when you went to run a program, your computer would just in time compile that Java bytecode into machine appropriate language. Well, that wasn't fast enough, so Google sort of did something a little different with their Dalvik system. And now they're saying, well, Dalvik is maybe not the best thing. So ART, the difference with ART is that when you download an app from the Google Play Store, when you're installing the application, it's basically compiling it into machine-specific binary. So it's basically taking the Java bytecode application and compiling it into a binary, especially just for your phone. So they are squeezing every little bit of performance that they possibly can out of this. Theoretically, it should mean this Java stuff will run at native speed because it will have been compiled for your phone. So it's really exciting. And if you've got a Nexus 7, you can go turn it on now. You got to go into About the Phone, Kernel Options, tap, I think, the kernel version like 7 times to put it in developer mode. Then you get an extra menu option called Developer, then tap Developer. And then it's like, would you like to use Dalvik or Art? And you say Art. And then you reboot, and then the phone or your tablet's a little bit flaky, but it's magical.
One other thing they're doing to improve performance. So Apple, they have their Metal Graphics API that they've been going crazy about with, I believe it's iOS 8. So right here, Android decided to make the Android extension pack, and they've been working together with NVIDIA on this. And this is going to allow ARM chips to do OpenGLES stuff, like I guess OpenGLES extensions. And we're talking like tessellation. We're talking like DirectX 11 style effects, some crazy lighting effects and that sort of thing, right there on Android. And this is going to tie into some of Google's other initiatives that we're about to talk about. But right now, that means a way faster experience for games and just a way better experience for games on Android. Now, the smaller screens, I mean, the games are going to look really good. But imagine what they're going to do when they start putting this thing onto larger screens. Again, like I said, we're going to talk about that in just a second.
So it's possible to run platform-specific binaries on Android right now. It's just that the developer experience of that is like bamboo shoots up your fingernails. And this is bringing those things to the platform. And then the whole strategy with Ant makes sense because, Art, because you can sort of marry those things together in sort of a generic way. And the Art stuff being native binary, and then having the native binary platform-specific OpenGL stuff for the different types of OpenGL hardware that you might have is sort of a win-win situation in terms of not making your developers completely insane. Because the iOS development stack with Xcode is not completely terrible.
You know something else that I'm really looking forward to? I'm looking forward to these smart notifications or the enhanced notifications. And what they're doing with that is the machine is, I guess Android is actually learning which notifications are the most important to you over time, and then it always arranges the important ones at the top of the list. So when you swipe down, you get your notifications. And the other thing, I guess, with the whole material interface is that they're seeing everything as almost like paper. They want to see things as tangible objects, even though they're inside the screen. So each individual little thing can be picked up and moved, just like rearranging papers or note cards or something like that. All right, so Google also has another initiative called Android One, and Android One is really looking to do exactly what I've always said Google is trying to do, and that is to get the next 1 billion people online using mobile devices, and they have a pretty ingenious strategy here for this. Now, Apple typically controls their hardware, or they always control their hardware, and Google's had some issues controlling their hardware and software because they allow everyone from Samsung to Motorola to Chinese companies that nobody's heard of. They allow them all to create phones and use the software and also modify the software. Well, with Android One, what they're doing is they're putting out a list of hardware that's going to make things run nicely and also make things run quickly, but they're also going to be controlling the new version of Android that's going to be going on these devices to make sure that they don't get bogged down by extra software that's going to make the devices clunky. Now, in doing this, they're saying they're able to develop handsets that are, I guess, can be built for under $100. If they can do that, that means we'll have a lot of phones coming out in emerging markets that are going to be under $200. So that'll really help in places like Africa and India and just parts of China, just all these emerging markets that where everyone's not connected yet. So that's pretty interesting. Above and beyond all that, we also have a new version of Android TV coming out. And my shockwave keeps crashing, so I'm just going to leave it alone. Don't touch it, just let it crash. So now Android TV, they had Google TV, and that was kind of whatever. And then they got Chromecast. So what's different about Android TV? Well, I'm going to tell you right now. Android TV puts the content first on the list, then all the apps are second on the list. A lot of these devices that are coming out, it's like you open them up and it's just a box full of apps, and you're like, oh, okay, where's my content? I got this thing because I want to enjoy content. And then finally you scroll down and there it is. The other thing that's interesting about this is the way that it communicates. It's a bit different. Like with Chromecast and this sort of thing, you had a controller, and if you wanted to play a game, like an Android game or a game on Chromecast, you could use like any controller and it would work. This will work with controllers as well, but you can get like a dedicated console-style game controller, and then you can play your Android games. And there's going to be several different boxes coming out that are going to be using the Android TV platform, so you can get them with different hardware configurations. You can play more powerful games, and with some of the new developments coming out with their partnerships with NVIDIA, we could see this as being a really interesting in-home game system. Like, pretty much a competitor to some of the big consoles. It's going to be cheaper. It can do probably more than you can do on the consoles. It's not going to have the same quality as far as graphics go, but there are some decent Android games out there, and I think this is completely going to make systems like the what's that thing called that no one bought? I don't remember that one Android system. Yeah, the Ouya. It's probably going to make stuff like the Ouya pretty obsolete. But yeah,
well, we called that. I mean, there was like they're gonna come out with this thing, and it's like no one's going to buy this because it's a turd.
And it was a turd. So I don't know. Do you feel like that's pretty accurate? My assessment there of Android TV.
I think that yes, and I had some predictions, and the opportunity for me to make the predictions ahead of time never came up, but my predictions would have been massively wrong anyway. And I don't know why these companies are not jumping on this, because during the Android TV thing, I really expected to see something about like a shared screen experience, or like making it generic between your tablet and your desktop, because there have been a lot of really innovative web games where you go on to a website and you go to a URL, and then you get a QR code, and then you can run the app or go to the site on your phone, and then your phone scans the QR code, and that sort of syncs up your desktop and your phone, and you can use your phone as a controller for something that's happening on the screen. And it's sort of contrived because they're both web paged, and the magic is all happening server side, and it's all web page insanity. But if you look at applications like Chromecast and things, and the Chromebook and other Google initiatives, they're even divorcing the screen from your data and what's happening in the cloud. And so I'm really surprised that next generation Android devices don't let you, the user, make generic use of the screen. And what I mean by that is, like, if I have a laptop and I want to use, the Nexus 7 as a screen, there are software solutions that let me do that, but they're really high latency. I'm watching a video on my Nexus 7. I want a Chromecast. I've got a Chromecast. I want to watch it on TV. I can send it to the TV, but it's still sort of a separate experience. I think I want to do something where it's sort of a married experience, where the application is running on the television, and I can interact with that application on a tablet. And I don't know how to explain that user paradigm, except for it's like a desktop computer with multiple monitors. And so I would just drag off to the side, or drag toward myself to move a window from one display to another. I would really like to see, tablets and mobile and things like that let you share their screen so that you can move things around. I mean, how cool would it be if you could just use your tablet as a second screen for your desktop computer without having to do one of those crazy applications that does it through Wi-Fi? Think about texting and other applications that require specific hardware on your phone. A lot of popular applications let you do that from your laptop wirelessly, but it's not really a very good experience. It's not built into the operating system. Google is in a position with Android to do that on their Chromebooks and their even inside of Chrome itself, so that your text messages and all of this stuff go through Hangouts. And so they're working on that kind of thing, but it's not a cohesive experience. And Google TV didn't look like they had really put all that together. Although they're working on it with notifications, it just wasn't a cohesive experience like it should be.
Before we move on, I mean, yeah, I think that a lot of that would it probably require some something on the user end as well, because people are not going to be used to that sort of thing. So I guess that Google just would have to sort of train them to get used to those activities of sharing, and then possibly, I'm just worried that it might not be used as much right off the bat, because it's not something that people even think to use. So I think there would be a bit of a learning curve and stuff.
I agree, but I think that's where good user interface design could really solve that problem, because, there were smartphones, and then it took Apple making a smartphone that only had a third of the features of all the other smartphones to be like, yeah, smartphones. And then everybody was like, how did I ever live without this? It's a smartphone that doesn't have copy and paste. It turns out that was in the way all the time. So,
yeah. Before we move on, I'm going to take a look at these smartwatches that are going to be coming out very soon, just a showcase of several different smartwatches here. This Motorola smartwatch is beautiful. It's like the first one that's circular. I hate these things so much. My God, I hate these things. But they're going to be everywhere soon, and they're mainly just going to be for notifications, text messages, Facebook stuff, status updates, little things like that. You won't have much control over swiping. You can also see your phone calls and that sort of thing on there, but you'll have to pick up your phone to answer them. But there's going to be a lot of these devices coming out soon, and they're going to be working with all the new Android devices. And like I said, my God, I hate these things so much. Just keep them away from me. And if you're going to go and hang out with me and we're getting a beer and you wear one of these things, I will smash it on the table. We're there to hang out, not for you to do this the entire time. No, this is not cool.
I can check my phone. I mean, I can check my watch 150 times a day instead of my phone.
Yeah, then it's just as bad if you go out and like we're trying to like hang out and have a beer, have lunch, and the entire time you're like this on your phone. It's like, hey, what are you doing, man? So if you're on a business, trip or something, and you're sitting down and you're doing business on your phone, that's one thing. If it's like 8 o'clock on a Friday night and we're going out to hang out and have a beer at the pub or whatever, and you're sitting there doing this, I will smash it on the table. Anyway, that's my rant. I've been hanging out with nerds all week, and every time we go anywhere to like hang out, like I'm sitting there like just looking around the room, and it's like 9 people doing this, and I'm like, hey guys, hey, I guess I'll just talk to the waiter. So where are you from? And then the waiter's like pulls out his phone, and I'm like, no, God, why? Anyway, we have a couple more things to talk about as far as Google goes. So Larry Page says that 100,000 lives could be saved every year because of data mining. So he said that the fear of data mining has been keeping them away and keeping Google away from mining medical records. And if Google could just take a look and mine some data from these medical records, that possibly 100,000 people could be saved every year. Now, a lot of people are really scared about this, and then Larry Page was like, well, when Street View came out, people were freaking out about that. In fact, we had like giant bearded Scotsmen meeting us at the foot of their driveway with battle axes, and we were like, okay, let's not drive down that road. And they kept going, so everyone was really scared about that. And then he's like, see, we've not abused that much. It's just Street View, and everyone likes it now, and they see that it's not that bad, and it's a good trade-off. So he's saying that that the fear of data mining is really what's holding the progress back. And I'm not sure if I agree or not. It really does sound like Larry Page just wants to be able to mine everything because there's money involved in it. It's profit. I'm not sure if the 100,000 lives, I guess, being saved may be a byproduct. As far as Google's concerned, even if it's good for society, as far as Google's concerned, the profit is going to be the bottom line. I mean, they're a freaking corporation. They got to make money before they save lives. I guess everyone they save is someone else who may be using a Google service, so that could interest them as well. I don't know. Do you think Google would abuse, abuse our rights or abuse our privacy if they were able to mine our medical background and history?
Well, so it's kind of a loaded question because Google's idea of abuse is very different than perhaps an ordinary citizen's idea of abuse is perhaps very different than, a citizen in the EU and their idea of abuse. And so I'm not really sure. It's like we could save 100,000 lives a year, from what and how exactly? Is it strictly just a data mining thing? Or one of the things they talked about in I.O. was their health platform. And so that is going to be sensors and metrics of health data directly collected by Google. So things like your blood pressure, temperature, sleep cycles, that sort of data, whatever, Nike Fitbit, I don't know, whatever they can get data from and putting it in the Android platform. And, Apple's planning the same thing. Apple is planning pretty much exactly the same platform. Both companies are working on a platform for you to store and house all of your personal health data. But it's not even anything like it includes doctor visits and cholesterol levels and things like that. But it's also a lot of just basic information like blood pressure, temperature, sleep cycles, things that you can gather on your own, and caloric intake and stuff like that. And that kind of stuff may actually lead to just people doing things more healthy on their own. And that could be a significant percentage of the 100,000. But it's possible to do those things without actually mining the data for for money. You're just using the data to tell people it's like, well, somebody that's your height and your weight, you should be this, or your height and your weight over here, you should be that, or maybe you should go see a doctor and things like that.
So I'm kind of curious to know what you guys think about this. Could it be a good thing for humanity? Could be, could allowing Google to mine that data and use it, could that be good? Let us know what you think. One more thing about Google, they have acquired Dropcam. Now, Dropcam is a service. They've got a couple different models of their video cameras, their home surveillance cameras that you can install wherever you want in your home. And they also have these little I guess, little devices that you can stick on windows and doors, and then you'll get like a notification if one of those windows or one of those doors opens up. So that's kind of interesting. So what does it mean that Google has acquired them? Well, Google will now be able to do whatever they want with that data, almost. Not quite, because I've gotten ahead of myself already. Let me just go finish covering what Dropcam does, because this is the important part. It records video footage and stores it to the cloud. And for, I think it's like $300 a year, you get the last 30 days, and for like $100 a year, you get like the last 7 days of footage stored in the cloud. So if something happens, you can go and check the cloud storage and just see what the hell went wrong, or see what happened, see if someone broke in. And now that Google owns this company, they could integrate it into a lot of different things. So currently, it is going to be under the privacy policy of Nest. And the Nest privacy policy is a little stricter than Google's privacy policy, because right now you'll have to, I guess, with Nest, you have to opt in to sharing your information with Google. But, I mean, they are positioning themselves in a way where they could totally monitor everything you do in the house. They could see, hey, all of a sudden now there are, a mom and a dad and a little baby. Let's start advertising all kinds of diapers and stuff. Or let's see that this one guy keeps coming over. He's hanging out with the daughter in their room all the time. It looks like a boyfriend. They could know a lot of personal things about you based upon this footage if they're allowed to harvest it. And they wouldn't even have to have a human sit down and look at the footage. They could have their computers analyze the data and try to run some algorithms, figure things out, and then use that to market to you, or use that to just paint a better picture of your lifestyle so that they can improve your experience across their different platforms and that sort of thing. This is kind of stuff that you would see in like a sci-fi movie. I feel like we're moving into an era where we'll be, talking to our house, and our house will know things, and our house will know where we're going. And when we get back home, it'll be like, oh, I see that you went to the steakhouse. How was your steak today, John? And you'd be like, pretty good. And be like, would you like for me to get the computer in the John ready? I see you've eaten some Mexican food or whatever. And that's kind of the future I see with this.
I see nothing wrong with an electronic personal assistant that carries out my bidding, but it had better never kiss and tell, and two, it's got to be clear about who it's working for. Is it working for me, or is it working for somebody else? You can't have two masters. So I have little software agents that do things for me, like the thermostat and like the home automation stuff, but they work for me, and I've written them, and they're clunky as hell, but it doesn't matter, because I know that there's not a hidden agenda. I know that the information is not being shared with anybody else, but it's sort of, I would love to have some of this kind of functionality, but not if it comes at a cost of sending all this information to the cloud, because automated processing can totally happen. Look at all the Google Street View data. A lot of that is largely automated processing, and the stuff that they couldn't solve with machine learning, they're able to do with CAPTCHAs. And so like house numbers for, when you're on Google Street View and it's like, oh, this is approximately 207, whatever, this is approximately 207 Main Street or whatever, then they couldn't quite get the house numbers to line up with like the maps. And so as part of the CAPTCHAs, for making sure that people are not bots, it's asking people to tell Google what the house numbers are. And so you see little pictures of numbers, and they're like an odd angle, and it's like, what is the number it's asking me to type in? But it looks like it's taken out of a picture. It really is. It's Google Street View and other Street View from other companies. Pictures where they've identified a house number on a mailbox or the side of a house or something, and they're like, I couldn't quite read the number. You read the number for me to prove that you're human. It's like, okay, sounds good. There you go. It's like, wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, I guess the thing that I'm going to worry about the most is who is in control of the data. And like you just said, you can't have two masters. And I immediately worry whenever you're building something on someone else's property. Like, would you go build a house on your neighbor's property? Would you go build a house on a property that was owned by a corporation? Would you go build your house on Google's property? That's essentially what's happening right now. Is a lot of us are building our house. If you're using like Google Drive or Dropbox or whatever, you're building your house on somebody else's property. We're using YouTube right now. Our house is on somebody else's property. So anytime any of my stuff is on somebody else's property, I am slightly worried, because the property owner is usually the master. And unless we have our own cloud setup that we control, we're not the master. Anyway, let's move on and get away from Google. You ready to finally get away from Google?
Yeah.
Move on.
Yeah, we've talked about nothing else this episode. Sorry. Google's up. It's Google I/O. A lot of things happen. Sorry.
Yeah, it was kind of the Google week. Anyway, I do want to apologize to everyone out there who freaked out about the T-Mobile thing last week. Now, we said that T-Mobile was being anti-competitive because they were, I guess they were going to give free bandwidth for their own music service. And it looks like that article that I read and that was based on that, it looked like it was not entirely correct because they are going to be allowing anybody to stream freely without going against their data bandwidth cap with most music services out there. I still think this is anti-competitive because it's allowing one service to have something or multiple services to have something for free when everything else still costs against you. So it's going to the smaller guys out there are still going to get the shaft, I guess. But
what if I've got Slingbox or another service like that, and I stream music from my own home server? I don't get anything, and so in that sense, it is anti-competitive.
Yeah, I still think, people were still yelling and screaming about how good this was. But yes, to me, this is still anti-competitive. But I am sorry that I said that it was only going to count for T-Mobile's service, and it's actually going to count for several different services. But still,
data is data.
Yeah, it's for me, this is still against net neutrality because it is favoring one service over another. Now what they're doing is no longer counting the speed test. So if you run a speed test, that does not count for your monthly data cap. And that seems relaxed and cool and everything. But T-Mobile, if you guys really want to be relaxed and cool, get rid of data bandwidth caps altogether. It may be difficult to do, but if you guys are going to be the uncarrier, something like this still goes against the principles of net neutrality. And you guys are out there doing it with your arms in the air like champions. And while it is interesting and cool to allow certain things to count or to not count against your monthly data bandwidth cap, it still goes against the principles of net neutrality. So, and I hope John Liggery understands this. He seems to be kind of like, why are people not all for this? They should be like, yay, you guys are being awesome. You're the uncarrier. We love it. But I don't think he understands the full perspective that we have. So it's cool, but it could be better, I guess. All right. Moving right along. Have you seen the time, Wendell?
Uh-oh. Rant 30.
It is Rant 30. Arrow has lost at the Supreme Court. So how quickly can you sum up Arrow? Because you're better at summing them up than I am.
Okay, so Arrow is a service that is offered to people in cities that have broadcast television coverage. And so what they do is they lease you an antenna and a DVR in your service area. So let's say I was in the Manhattan service area. I can get an aerial, an antenna, an HD receiver, whatever, and stick it out my apartment window and pick up high-definition television signal broadcasts for a lot of stations. A lot of stations broadcast in New York City. Now, if I'm, low to the ground or, in an alley or I don't have a window, I might have trouble picking up signal. But theoretically, the signal is there. It is on the airwaves for public broadcasting. And before there was cable television, there was public broadcasting, and the companies still do it. In fact, the FCC still allocates spectrum to the television companies. They use it for other purposes other than public broadcasts, including newscasts from one place to another. And so the quid pro quo that these companies have with the American public, theoretically, since the inception of television, is that these broadcast signals can be picked up and enjoyed by any and all. But it doesn't cover the whole country, and it's maybe not practical. For some reason, it's not practical to build a broadcast antenna system for the whole country. It was somehow more better to run wires to every house, okay, whatever, and thus was born cable television. And so now, fast forward almost 100 years, and we have the service Arrow, where in the city they will lease you a tiny 1-inch cube in their building, basically, with a tiny high-definition television antenna and your own DVR and a web interface to get to it and stream it. Not unlike setting up Slingbox or HD Home Run or, Dish and Time Warner and Comcast all have DVR services they offer for cable television. And so it's just a package. You go on the website, you sign up, they make sure that you're in an area where you could theoretically physically receive broadcast signal. It's not global, it's not worldwide, nothing like that. And so if I'm in New York City physically and they verify that, they will let me sign up for their service and they will lease me an antenna, and then I can receive a broadcast and set up the thing to record shows that I want and watch them whenever, just like as if I had done that physically in my apartment, or physically in my flat, or physically in my building, or on the roof of the building, or, you know, however that works. And so the Supreme Court has ruled that that is not kosher, that they are effectively rebroadcasting, and that they owe companies like NBC and CBS and other broadcasting companies a rebroadcasting fee, which cable companies pay. But the cable companies paying that fee is only a very, very recent change. That was not actually part of the deal whenever it was set up a long time ago, because it was decided that it was in the public's best interest for cable companies to do what they were doing. But that's basically, in a nutshell, what has happened.
Well, the thing here that's kind of funny is it really shows you that the Supreme Court justices do not understand technology, number one. And number two, it shows you that technology really doesn't matter. What really matters here is taking care of the cable companies. So we have, 6-3, in favor of ABC versus Arrow. So ABC won, and I mean, really, they're not rebroadcasting things. All you're doing is renting an antenna elsewhere. It's essentially the same thing as me renting an antenna down the block because the signal is better, and then having it pipe back to me through an Ethernet cable into my router, and then I can watch it on my computer screen. It's the same thing. It's just my antenna is elsewhere, and I'm getting the same, freely broadcasted signal that's available to anybody else who goes out and buys an antenna. Now, why this is so ridiculous is it really undermines a lot of the other services that are out there, and it really makes it difficult for companies to innovate, and it makes it very difficult for anyone to compete with the current powers that be. A lot of people are going to look at this and they're going to be like, you know what? We cannot afford to fight this. We may as well just completely, just drop our innovation, stop doing what we're doing, and just play their game, because they're just going to take us to court and no one's going to understand the technology and they're going to win anyway. So Fox has already jumped on this, and Fox is using the Arrow ruling against Dish, because Dish has a streaming service where they allow you to, they've got the Hopper or whatever, and they allow you to...
It's a DVR in your house.
Yeah, and it's essentially, they're using the Arrow ruling and some of the words and some of the different, I guess, just different aspects of the Arrow ruling to fight fight Dish's service. So it's kind of ridiculous, but the Arrow ruling is so ridiculous that it's going to allow for things like this to happen. Now, I mean, Fox has been fighting this for a while. They're like, hey, they're allowing people to skip our advertisements. Hey, they're rebroadcasting our stuff this way. This is technically a rebroadcast or whatever. So they've been angry for a while with Dish, and the courts so far have been ruling against Fox. But right now, they're bringing this back up because of the Arrow ruling, and they may actually win this time because now they're somewhat justified due to the terms of the Arrow ruling. It's really going to make it difficult for online streaming content. I mean, now companies can attack anything. Go ahead.
The really revealing thing is that during the case, Arrow said, hey, a lot of other companies that depend on things like if you have a DVR and you store your movie file in the cloud, that's going to interfere with people that do that, and there are people that do that. And ABC was like, no, that's not what we're saying at all. And then immediately, it's not even been a week, and here we have Fox being like, that's what we want. This is going to be a thing. The dissent for this is really good. The majority opinion was that the service was not simply an equipment provider, but acted like a cable system in that it transmitted copyrighted content. Okay, that is cloud storage service right there. That is it. And if that is, the law of the land, then Fox has got an open and shut case now, whereas before they didn't, which is crazy. But the dissenting opinion, in the dissent that expressed distaste for Arrow's business model, Justice Scalia said that the service had nevertheless identified a loophole in the law. It is not the role of this court to identify and plug loopholes, he said. It is the role of good lawyers to identify and exploit them, and the role of Congress to eliminate them if it wishes. And so, if the Supreme Court's job is not to exploit loopholes, or is not to plug loopholes in the law, and that's the job of Congress, how do we have this ruling? The dissenting opinion is like, well, we shouldn't rule this way because it's a loophole. And it's like, do the other people, and then the other people are saying, well, it's a loophole, but we're gonna rule this way because the intent was this. And it's like, I don't think the intent was that at all, because if you look at the history of the public broadcasting system, if you look at the history of high definition television, these television executives say, if we had the technology, this is almost a direct quote here, and it's not even from 15 years ago. The cable company executives literally say, if we had the technology to broadcast this high definition signal nationwide, the more the better, because the more exposure to our content, the more we can sell product, the better we have ad space. We are in this game for high definition television. It's great. And that was when they were negotiating with the FCC to get more spectrum for high definition television. And so, you know, what changed in the last decade between that and now?
It's a really sad day. Not looking forward to the fallout that's going to continue to occur, and I'm not looking forward to, I guess, all the cable companies out there who are going to get really excited and try to stifle competition in several different areas. Not looking forward to that at all. All right, let's talk about the NSA for just one moment. We only got one article right now. Germany has decided to end their contract with Verizon because, you know, Verizon, of course, is an American company, and Verizon was providing some infrastructure for Germany. Well, Germany, Angela Merkel. I mean, a lot of this is because, you know, the NSA was spying on Angela Merkel, like on her personal phones and stuff like that. So they also realized that Verizon, being an American company, is legally obligated to share certain things with the NSA, and a lot of this stuff is done in FISA courts. No one ever hears about it. Nobody ever knows about it. So the safest thing for Germany to do is to drop the business. So no more Verizon. The contract expires in 2015, and they're going to bring in, I guess, a new company that's going to provide a secure and safe infrastructure for them. So that's just one more way that the American companies are, I guess, losing thanks to the NSA's spying programs.
Well, and to be completely transparent here, Snowden actually did recently leak some documents that said that Germany may not have been as completely innocent as they claim to be. So this could just be posturing and political. Yeah,
that's true as well, because I know they've also been aiding, they've been aiding our government, they've been aiding the UK. So, yeah, they could be in bed with them, who knows. But I know Angela Merkel was rightly pissed off when she found out that the NSA was listening to her cell phone calls and that sort of thing. Yeah. All right. Last thing I want to talk about here is just kind of a funny article. It's 5 online privacy tips from an ex-FBI agent. Why is this even? This is on CNN.com, and these are so obvious and goofy that some of them. This is a bad article. I'm not even going to look at it. It's silly.
Yeah. It's there. If you're interested in it, you guys can click on the link, but that's all we're going to say about it.
You know, I'm not even sure if I agree with some of this stuff. I guess she's an ex-FBI agent, but yeah,
well,
I'm not even sure if I agree with some
one of
this.
The things is lie whenever you're asked to give info, and so I would totally lie whenever asked to give info, especially if it's like a store or something like that. You know, just don't let them aggregate any of the info. Like just misspell your name, craziness.
Yeah, one thing's funny. She said that she was doing that once. You know, she was just shopping, and her 7-year-old niece was like, "You're a liar." Like right there in the store, like called her out for lying, and she was like, So yeah, just make sure you don't bring your uber honest, you know, starry-eyed, blind to the horrors of the world child with you, because they'll.
I can't tell you how many mailing lists Gary Wozniak is on.
Gary Wozniak is on everything. So yeah. And also, you know, try to get a different photo ID aside from your. Why is my? Oh no, my. What a day! The camera just stopped working. Well, I'll let you do the ending.
Well, that's the end of the first part of the tech. You guys should look forward to the coverage of the mountain climb. We've got the hardware episode coming up, which should be out soon. There's going to be a lot of really exciting stuff in there. We've got all kinds of Z97 stuff coming up and all sorts of craziness. So stay tuned. Rate, subscribe. See you next time.
Yeah. And this is my camera. Absolutely nothing. We'll see you.